If we can save up about $200 real quick, we can go to the next gun show and get some badass AB-10 machine pistols. These are the words of a 17-year-old boy named Eric Harris. You may know him better as one of the Columbine killers. According to the Boston Globe newspaper, on September 10, 2001, Ali Bolmanham was convicted of weapons violations plus conspiracy to ship weapons to the terrorist organization Hezbollah. He and his brother Mohammed had purchased an arsenal of weapons from Michigan gun shows without undergoing background checks. These are just a couple examples of the effects that the gun show loophole is having on our country. Every year, hundreds of gun shows are held throughout the United States, giving access to dangerous firearms to minors and criminals. Therefore, I believe that the existence of a gun show loophole is unsafe and a deadly problem, and our country must instate background checks for all firearms at gun shows in order to prevent the events like the two I described earlier from happening. Now that you've heard a couple of examples of the effects of the gun show loophole, let us examine the problem further. Our country is not putting forth a sufficient effort to close the gun show loophole. Not enough states have universal background checks on all guns sold. According to the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, California, Colorado, Illinois, New York, Oregon, and Rhode Island are the only states that have a universal background check for all firearms sold at gun shows. Connecticut, Maryland, Pennsylvania are the states that have background checks on handguns only. Hawaii, Iowa, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, North Carolina, and Nevada require background checks and a license for handguns. However, 33 states require nothing. As you can see on this visual aid, the blue part represents the states that have universal background checks for all firearms. Pink represents the states that have checks only on handguns. Yellow represents the states that have checks and require licenses for handguns. And green are the states that require nothing. Since federal laws require background checks sold by licensed dealers, 60% of guns sold have background checks done on the purchasers. However, that means that 40% are not sold with background checks. These 40% are the percent that are not sold by people that are in business of selling guns. Therefore, they're sold through unlicensed sellers at gun shows, classified ads in the newspaper, the internet, and other individual encounters. That means there are no checks or paperwork done on the purchasers of these guns. This poster represents the number of guns sold in America. These 3 guns would have had background checks done on the purchasers. However, these 2 guns have no background checks done. The National Rifle Association is opposed to closing the gun show loophole with background checks. According to the NRA Institute for Legislative Action website, anyone that goes to a gun show, whether they intend to purchase a gun or not, must sign a ledger with identifying information on it. The NRA believes that this is an absurd request because every person that goes to the show would then have to sign the ledger and show an ID. However, according to Boston Globe writer John Rosenthal, buyers and sellers at gun shows are required to abide by the same reasonable standards that law-abiding gun buyers and the majority of federally licensed gun dealers must comply with. Now that we have examined the problem in depth, let us move on to the solution for closing the gun show loophole. In order to close the gun show loophole, we must require background checks on all firearms sold at gun shows in all the states. The Brady Act introduced background checks in 1994. According to the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, the National Institute Instant Criminal Background Check has prevented more than 1.4 million criminals and other prohibited purchasers from buying guns. The Brady Act also has a deterrent effect on people that would consider buying guns. As stated in the Boston Globe, Robin Anderson, who bought 3 guns for the 2 killers at Columbine, said that she would not have bought the guns if they had required background checks at the gun show. Background checks are also quick and efficient. Some groups fear that instating background checks would be a nightmare for gun shows, both for the people that attend and for the people that host. But according to the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, more than 95% of background checks can be completed in 2 hours, and most are completed as in little as 2 minutes. Closing the gun show loophole has worked in other states that did it, and will work in the rest of the country. People worry that by closing the gun show loophole, gun shows will go out of business. However, in Illinois, Pennsylvania, and California, they all closed the gun show loophole, and gun shows still do very well in those states. Now that you have heard about the gun show loophole's problems and solutions, let me finish by saying that the gun show loophole is obviously a dangerous practice that should not be allowed to continue. Our country cannot allow criminals and juveniles to purchase deadly firearms anymore. Background checks must be established for all types of firearm sales and gun shows so that we can do as much to prevent tragedies such as school shootings as possible. You have heard the threats to our society that allow the gun shows that will happen if we allow the gun show loophole to remain open. And you have learned that these threats can be prevented by background checks. Therefore, I think it is clear that universal background checks for all types of firearms must be required in every state in our country. In order to protect our friends, relatives, families, and self, I do not think that this is too much to ask.